This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 489, entitled Masculists have the option to be much nastier to women than feminazis are to men. Description. Masculists have a hatred of fluffy manslavers and fluffy feminist hypocrite genociders, so are motivated to be verbally aggressive towards them, claiming that women oppress men far worse than vice versa, with women's decades-lasting man-slavery of men, etc. Many of women's gender crimes against men last decades. Men are 3 times stronger across the chest than women, so need have no fear of being physically, painfully retaliated against by women when masculists verbally crucify the hated monoconscious feminazi bigots. We will thus see in the near future biconscious masculists being much more verbally violent against women than feminazis are towards men. The flyer itself. Masculists have the option to be much nastier to women than feminazis are to men. By Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Most monoconscious feminists, in brackets, that is, who have only had their feminist consciousness raised, who are not biconscious, that is, they have not had both their feminist and their masculist consciousnesses raised, since they know nothing about masculism, so are unaware that gender oppression is a two-way street, that women also oppress men, and in fact worse than vice versa, since even rape is small beer in comparison to women's, to fluffies, decades-lasting man-slaving parasitism. Close brackets, feel justified in being angry at men, since that is what feminism teaches women, namely that men are the oppressors and that women are the oppressed. Brackets. A fluffie, based on the word fluff, is a masculist label for a traditional woman who expects to live off the labour and money of a man, man-slaving him for decades. Close brackets. From a monoconscious feminist point of view, this anger at men by monoconscious feminists makes sense. Men do oppress women. You only have to read the many feminist books that are published at a rate of several a month to see that, for example, rape being probably the worst, along with spousal murder, then sexual harassment, domestic violence, the glass ceiling, etc. Biconscious masculists don't deny for a moment that men oppress women, but they certainly deny that gender oppression is a one-way street, the way a monoconscious feminist does. A biconscious masculist, however, is all too aware of how women oppress men, especially with the decades-lasting man-slavery of the hated, that is by the masculists, fluffies and fluffy feminists. The masculists have a hatred of fluffies, seeing them as manslavers and hence vermin to be wiped out in a sex war that punishes fluffies severely by effectively exterminating them slowly, by totally ignoring them, not even pumping and dumping them, forcing them to rot on the shelf, manless, sexless, loveless, babyless and spat at for being manslavers, which is a war issue to masculists who see manslavery as a far bigger issue than Negro slavery was in the 1800s in the US, since there are today billions of manslaves who need to be liberated from fluffy, manslaving parasites. The US Civil War was largely about the immorality of Negro slavery. The Masculist sex war is largely about the immorality of manslavery, and given the hugely larger numbers of manslaves in the world than Negro slaves in the US, then the Masculists feel fully justified in feeling a real hatred of fluffies and an even greater hatred of fluffy feminists who have taken over the divorce courts and made divorce so toxic for divorcing fathers that these fluffy feminists are seen by Masculists not only as hypocrites, open brackets, for wanting equal rights with men in the parliaments, but rejecting equal obligations with men, in brackets, to share equally the burden of earning the living, by bothering to get career-competent educations, by studying career-competent majors in high school and college, that the economy values and pays well for, close brackets. But also as genociders, since these even more hated fluffy feminists have become indirect genociders because of their control of the divorce courts, in brackets, where one father in 4 is financially crucified, losing custody of his kids with a 90% probability, losing his house to his ex-wife, half his wealth and stuff to her, forced to pay for his kids whom he will barely see, and if his ex-wife is a real fluffy, he may have to pay her alimony for the rest of his life, with no legal nor moral obligation on her part to get off her fat parasitic ass and FIP up, in brackets, FIP, F-I-P, equals financially independent person. So that she continues to parasite him off him after the divorce, the way she did before the divorce, close brackets. Causes 2/3 of young men in many countries to reject marriage and paternity, thus crashing the birth rate. But these millions of MGTOWing men, that's MGTOW, men going their own way, are merely reacting to the toxicity of the divorce courts, controlled by the hated, fluffy feminists. So given the above, it's not surprising that Masculists, that's men's livers, have such a hatred for fluffy, manslaving parasites, open brackets. Given that, thanks to men, they have a life expectancy of 85 years and hence a career window of half a century, so they have a powerful moral duty to get off their fat parasitic asses and FIP up, so that they do not parasite off the money and labour of a man for decades of his life, manslaving him for decades. The core idea of masculism is that it is a rebellion by men against being manslaves to women, working for women for decades of their lives. Masculists won't look twice at fluffies and treat them like vermin, to be spat at, rejected, ignored to death, and have an even greater hatred of the fluffy feminists who oppress divorcing fathers so mightily in their divorce courts that they control. This decade, we will see millions of biconscious masculists haranguing monoconscious feminists in the streets, at meetings, in public talks at universities, in high schools, etc. This flyer is mainly about the idea that when masculists express their hatred and contempt towards monoconscious feminists, they have the option, the luxury, to be a lot more verbally aggressive with these MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots, than feminazis are towards men. This is a consequence of the basic asymmetry in strengths between men and women. Women evolved a deep fear of men in the distant past because men are so much stronger than women, in fact about 3 times stronger across the chest than women. So if a man got truly enraged at a woman in the distant past, he could have so easily killed her. So women evolved to fear male anger and rage, so they shy away from it when they see the first signs of it. There are numerous videos on the internet of rather stupid feminazis who have been so brainwashed with the idea that men do not hit back at women, that they feel safe in being physically violent with men, kicking them, punching them, only to learn the hard way, the very hard way, when the man they are violating explodes in anger with his testosterone raging, who then picks up this deluded female and hurls her to the ground, or punches her unconscious with one punch, etc. These stupid women then learn a life lesson, never to physically assault a man again for the rest of her life, since she does not want to experience a second time in her life the excruciatingly painful violence of a very angry man. So we men, we Masculists, have this superior strength to our advantage, and not just physical strength, but verbal strength as well. We men are capable of being terrifyingly verbally violent to women if we choose to. With our testosterone raging in our blood, that is 10 times greater than in women, then if we become truly angry and hateful at the monoconscious feminazis, then we can be terrifyingly threatening to them, and Masculists can use that fact to men's benefit. Normally, men have to be nice to women, since men want to penis women. It is the woman who decides which man she allows to ejaculate in her vagina. But with monoconscious, misandrous, feminazi shits, we certainly don't want to penis them, so we don't have to be nice to them. Because we are men and stronger than women, we don't have to hold back with our verbal aggression towards women, so there is a lack of fear in men of physical retaliation coming from the women verbally attacked. This is not, however, the case when the roles are reversed. Most women, even most monoconscious feminazis, don't dare be too verbally or physically aggressive with a man in case he explodes in rage and makes mincemeat out of her. Women have good reason to fear male strength and testosterone-fueled male anger and hatred, so women tend to mute their violence, whereas a man, that is a Masculist, when haranguing monoconscious feminazi vermin, does not have this fear, so has the option to ratchet up his verbal aggression with little or no fear that the woman attacked will become explosively violent with him and do him real physical damage. So, very angry Masculists have the option to be terrifyingly verbally aggressive with monoconscious feminazis, which is the main point of this flyer. This is the end of part 1.